Hello and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast, brought to you by Performance Insights, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide. Just click on www.performanceinsights.co.uk and send us your requirements.
Hello, I'm Mark Gallagher and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast. Well, I'm very pleased to say I'm recording this in Melbourne, Australia on the eve of the first Grand Prix weekend of the 2025 season. Precisely, it's actually Friday morning, so ahead of practice. And this is going to be a relatively short podcast because I'm just going to give you some thoughts on Formula One as we head into the new season, and particularly after spending all day yesterday in the paddock at the Albert Park circuit, meeting up with friends and business contacts and talking about the season ahead and enjoying some of the buzz around Formula One as the new season is about to start. And we'll then be having a little conversation with none other than Guenther Steiner, who is here working with Network 10 Television in Australia, also taking part in his public tour, his book tour, which he's doing with Fane. If any of you listening, particularly in the UK, are interested in coming along to listen to Guenther Steiner and his ghostwriter, stroke biographer, James Hogg, they're doing a 46-date tour of the UK, and you can buy tickets through the Fane website, that's fane.co.uk, and I can promise you the show is terrific. I went to it on Wednesday evening here in Melbourne, and there were, I think, 2,300 people in the audience. They all had a good laugh. Some of it was at Guenther's expense. Most of it was just in response to all the fantastic stories and insights that Guenther and James shared about Guenther's career to date, and the intricacies of setting up the Haas Formula One team, all the way through to Guenther's departure from the team at the end of 2023, and then what he's gone on to since. But I have to say, some fantastic anecdotes along the way, particularly some that I really enjoyed about Niki Lauda, about meeting his fellow Austrian hero, going to work for him at Jaguar Racing, and the ins and outs of that. So I can certainly recommend you joining the Guenther Steiner tour with Fane if you get the opportunity. So going back to being in the paddock yesterday, the thing which really struck me was, of course, that traditional start of season feel that you have when everyone congregates. Even though there has been pre-season testing, once you get the full race team and all of the people associated with that, marketing and sponsorship people and hospitality folks, who are not all present at pre-season testing. So when you get the race team turn up for this first race in Melbourne, you have everyone together, and there really is a start of term feeling about it. So really nice atmosphere in the paddock. Of course, all the media joining together as well. Very good media turnout for this race. And the big story in town, and we've been saying this for some months, and I think it's going to continue to run and run, is Lewis Hamilton. And it was really interesting. You could notice yesterday that of all of the teams up and down the paddock, there was one team where there were slightly more photographers outside, slightly more television cameras, slightly more hangers-on, all just kind of hovering, and that was, of course, Ferrari because of Lewis. And at one point, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc came out of the garage to go down with their helmet and their hands device to be weighed. And it was quite noticeable that when Lewis came out of the garage, he was surrounded by a huge posse of people. I would think there were probably 15, 20 people who moved en masse with Lewis all the way down through the paddock. He was trying to be discreet, but they weren't letting him away with that. So it was almost like a kind of a tidal wave of energy moved down the paddock with Lewis. And then Charles Leclerc came out, and he had, I think, two people with him, and that was about it. He just wandered down on his own. And it does make you wonder how the dynamic is going to play out between those two, because Charles Leclerc has been very much the number one driver in that team, hence the reason why Ferrari were, I think, perhaps a little bit too quick to let Carlos Sainz Jr. go. I do think they may regret that decision in the fullness of time. Nothing against Lewis Hamilton at all, quite the opposite. But the one thing that I had with Carlos and Charles was a very happy team, where Charles was able to assert his leadership, I suppose, really as number one driver, and I don't think Carlos was ever happy to play number two driver, but he played a very strong supporting role there, race-winning role, of course. With Lewis and Charles, you've got two bulls in the field, and based on past experience, this usually works for a little while, and then eventually you get to the crunch moment when they're either fighting over the same piece of tarmac, fighting over the same victory. One's looking for a better strategy in a race over the other, and then the fireworks can start. Now, personally, I hope that doesn't happen, but let's remember that when you talk to people like James Allison and Toto Wolff about the Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton years at Mercedes, they will tell you that it became, I think the word James Allison used at one point to me on a podcast a few years ago, was it actually started to become destructive within the team, and you don't need that. So it'll be really interesting to see how that all pans out. A couple of other thoughts which I wanted to share with you. I think a lot of interest around the rookies, or the near rookies, people like Ollie Berman, and of course Liam Lawson, Max Verstappen's new teammate. Ollie and Liam having, of course, already raced in F1 very briefly. Big interest around Kimi Antonelli. I mean, we have essentially six new young drivers this year, and it's a tall order for them. A lot of expectation, a lot of pressure on them, and they're not in teams at the back of the grid either. With Kimi being at Mercedes-Benz alongside George Russell, and then of course Liam in the very very hot seat beside Max Verstappen. And I say the very, very hot seat because, as we know, Max is not an easy teammate to be up against. He is so good at what he does. He doesn't take many prisoners on track, including with his teammate. He is there to win, and it's that formidable mindset that he does that is why he's now 4 times world champion. Liam Lawson, super guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times. A bit disappointed to hear some of the British media, some key influential British media, kind of downplaying Liam and saying that they weren't sure that he deserved to have the drive. Well, he, in Red Bull's opinion, and it's a strong opinion, he is deserving of the drive. They had all the data from his past performances and were able to make a decision based on that. They obviously think that part of the jigsaw within Red Bull in terms of replacing Sergio Perez is the right thing to do. And Liam Lawson deserves to be given a break rather than getting criticised before he's even done a single Grand Prix as Max Verstappen's teammate. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating year. Liam, at the end of the day, only has to do the thing that Sergio Perez was unable to do in those last 2 seasons with the team, which is to get within a whisker or two of Max Verstappen's lap times in qualifying. So if he's a tenth or two slower than Max, that's going to be acceptable. Liam, I'm sure, will be aiming to try and beat Max whenever he can. But I think Dr. Helmut Marko at Red Bull has already made it clear that Liam's job is not to beat Max. Liam's job is to support Max, to build his experience, and particularly to use this season to bed in with the team, and ultimately then to become part of the team's long-term plan, which would be a great result. The media in Formula One almost never talk about the sponsors, apart from the fact that the sponsors have been increasing in number in recent years. It's certainly been a barometer of the success of Formula One. I think, again, the point of walking down the paddock yesterday and visiting the teams was to see just how many people there were at the racetrack and in the hospitality units on a Thursday. Now, bearing in mind, there's no Formula One on-track action on a Thursday, and it used to be that the Thursday was a pretty dead day for sponsors. Friday there'd be a little bit of a sprinkling of guests turn up, and then the busyness was left to Saturday and Sunday, but not so anymore. So Albert Park, Thursday, hospitality rooms were in many cases absolutely rammed with guests. I talked to one sponsor who said to me that they have a lot of guests who now want to come on a weekday because they, perhaps for family reasons, perhaps for work reasons, cannot come on the weekend. So they said the Thursdays and Fridays are really popular, and they put on all kinds of kind of pit lane visits and driver or team principal visits to the hospitality suites. When you arrived in Albert Park, one thing that really struck me was the fact that the entry area to the paddock club, the Formula One paddock club, which is the main hospitality, was the Amex Lounge, the American Express Lounge. And you had to go through the American Express atrium and lounge, and then over a bridge into the main paddock club. And American Express, of course, one of the world's leading credit card companies, and their arch rivals, MasterCard and Visa, both now in Formula One. MasterCard, a company which I was very privileged to work with back in my days at Jordan Grand Prix. We brought MasterCard into Formula One after their unfortunate episode with Lola at the beginning of 1997, but we converted them into a Jordan partner, and they were with our team through the best years. Fabulous brand, great company to work with. But MasterCard now, of course, in Formula One with McLaren, and Visa, of course, in Formula One with Red Bull. And that RB car looks magnificent in the Visa branding, which has been developed. I must say, Visa and the team have done a fabulous job with what is very simple, clear, beautiful branding. I think arguably one of the best liveries on the grid. But credit card wars are well and truly with us in Formula One, and that in itself is a really good barometer of the success of Formula One in recent years, because when you get an entire sector come in and bring the equivalent of the Coca-Cola wars to Formula One, so that be that in IT companies or banks or credit card companies, it just pushes values up increasingly. So really interesting to see that. And going down through all the teams, I mean, we've had a really interesting survey done at Performance Insights of all of the sponsors in Formula One, and it is just, it's been exploding. Very noticeable when you're on the mailing list for the teams just how many sponsorship announcements there have been since the beginning of the 2025 year. I mean, every week you're getting notifications about new sponsors or partners or sponsorship renewals. Some days you're getting multiple press releases from teams. Even this morning on the Friday of the Melbourne Grand Prix, announcements coming in about new technical partners, new suppliers, new licensing agreements, new sponsorships. So the commercial departments in Formula One absolutely flat out dealing with the demand that there is from the world of commerce for Formula One to position and build brands and to activate around the excitement that there is in Formula One. One company that I was reflecting on when I saw into their garage yesterday was Mercedes sponsor Petronas. They came into Formula One in 1995. Here we are in 2025. 30 years they have been in Formula One. They came in, of course, as a sponsor of the Sauber team in 1995. Then in 1999, they became a title sponsor of the Malaysian Grand Prix when Malaysia arrived in the Formula One Championship back in 1999 with that wonderful Sepang circuit built alongside the KLIA, Kuala Lumpur International Airport, outside Kuala Lumpur. Kuala Lumpur, of course, being the headquarters of Petronas as Malaysia's national oil company, a company founded 50 years ago in 1974. And if any of you have ever wondered about Petronas, well, obviously for those of you maybe in Europe or the Americas, perhaps not in markets where Petronas are particularly visible. You know, when you're in Malaysia, you can drop into a Petronas filling station, you can buy your Petronas fuel, your lubricants, all that kind of thing for your car. I mean, it's a huge company and a huge brand. When I say a huge company, what kind of money are we talking about? Well, just bear in mind, next time you're worrying about whether Petronas can afford to continue doing Formula One, in 2023, their revenue was $73 billion. Just think about that number, $73 billion in 1 year. Really very large company. Although in oil industry terms, actually, there are many who are larger. And of course, the largest one of all, which is also in Formula One, that's Aramco. So they're sponsors, of course, of the Aston Martin team, but also of the Formula One World Championship. They had revenues in the same year of just under $500 billion. So quite a bit bigger, 7 times bigger than Petronas. And those two companies are two of what are known as the seven sisters of the energy sector, the big state-owned oil giants, which have grown up around the world. As we've continued our love affair with the fossil fuel industry, and of course this is the last year of fossil fuels being used to power Formula One cars next year as we move to synthetic fuel. So there's my little Petronas insight. So there's my reflections on a day spent in Albert Park visiting the first Grand Prix of the 2025 Formula One World Championship. It's going to be a fascinating weekend ahead, but I've taken the opportunity to talk today to Guenther Steiner and get his thoughts on what lies ahead, not so much his predictions, because, I think we're all actually enjoying the unpredictability of Formula One, but his thoughts on the big stories of the 2025 season and his thoughts on what lies ahead over these 24 Grand Prix races.
So, Guenther, initial impressions after seeing only one session, but it's already interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting because obviously everybody was afraid about the rookies and the rookie hit, one hit the wall. But interesting as well how good the Williams is in the first session. Obviously, we cannot come to a conclusion after one session, but otherwise the ranking is as expected. The McLarens were fast, Ferrari was fast, Red Bull is there with Max, and Mercedes, I think out of the 4 is a little bit behind, but from Bahrain test, it matches pretty well.
So I was just talking to Jacques Villeneuve a few minutes ago, and Jacques was saying to me how it's so interesting in Formula One now how even with a customer powertrain you can be competitive. I mean, that's one of the stories of McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship last year, then seeing the Williams performance this morning. I mean, this has really helped to make things a little bit more equal for the teams. And I know this is something that you were very happy with, the way Formula One has changed. You can have a customer powertrain, and realistically, you can be quite competitive with that.
Yeah, I mean, McLaren won the championship last year with the customer powertrain, and I think that has come from when the FIA changed the rules that the customers need to have the same spec engine as the factory teams, and also now the engines are frozen, so all the engines are equal, and also the teams, once they are in the second and third season with the power unit, they know how to adapt the car to the power unit. The first year, always the manufacturers got the advantage because they tell the chassis people, tell the engine people what to do, how they want it, the factory team, and the other one just have to adapt then. And once you're in the second or first season with the customer engine, you know exactly what the engine will look like.
Now, as you said, Ollie Berman put the car on the wall, first practice session, not an ideal start for a rookie driver. This is the problem, isn't it, for these 6 young guys who have come into Formula One this year? Huge amount of pressure to deliver immediately, and you can't afford to make a mistake.
No, you cannot afford it, and also it's not good for the team. It's not only not good for you as a driver, for the team. You put normally the team, it's the first race, especially a smaller team. They don't have a lot of spare parts, and the next race is next weekend in China, so there's nothing in between. The spare parts you've got now, they need to last for next race as well. So even if you've got 2 sets of spare parts, one is gone now, so you're down at one. So you need to be careful, and obviously everybody's on their toes, trying to make sure nothing else happens, because otherwise something can happen like last year with Williams here, that they couldn't start the race because they didn't have a spare chassis.
So what do you think of that? Because a lot of fans are are commenting that Formula One is now so resource restricted because of the budget cap, that you're running up against this problem. Even the big teams are running up against the problem. If you have multiple accidents, you're right on the limit of what is possible to do operationally.
Yeah, but it's managing it, and everybody's got the same rules. So if you know the rules, you need to manage. You need to make sure that what you do, you don't take too much risk, but you have to take always risk. But it's down to you how much risk you take. If you want to put your money in to develop the car and not having spare parts, so do it. But when it happens, do not cry, because that is where a budget cap is in place. Because if you try to go say, we need more money, then again the big teams will have 10 sets of spare parts, and the small teams will still have only one.
Now, I went to your show. We talk about on the podcast. I've mentioned already about your book tour and your shows. And during your show, you were talking about, managing the drivers who were driving for you at Haas. When you look at teams like McLaren with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, when you look at a team like Ferrari, particularly with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, I mean, what is your opinion? Is it inevitable that there is going to be conflict in those teams because you have got effectively two number one drivers potentially in these teams, and sooner or later they're going to be fighting over the same race strategy or the same piece of tarmac or whatever? So what's your opinion on having two number ones versus having a very clear number one, number two strategy?
I always say you want two number one drivers. I think if you're a good team and you want to win the championship, you have to have the two best drivers you can get and the fourth. That's always my opinion. And then you need to manage it. Obviously, it's hard work to manage it. The easy way out is to have one number one driver and a number two driver. But in the end, that is not the best for the team. That is not the best performance. You always have to try to find that one. And then when you get into conflict, which you say because only one can be winning or being in front, you need to deal with it. And normally, the better guy should get the preference, because if you have got a number two driver, where does he get the motivation from to do the best for the team if he knows he's number two anyway?
So this is like a problem for Liam Lawson. So Liam Lawson has come into Formula One. Helmut Marko has publicly said Liam's job is not to challenge Max, but to support him. So from your perspective, that kind of puts Liam in a box. He's clearly number two, and that makes it even more difficult for him as a new driver into Formula One. How do you motivate yourself when you literally know you have the number one guy sitting on top of you?
I think what my opinion about Liam Lawson, knowing that Max is alpha, he's number one clearly, but he's very good. He's the best one out there in the moment. You've got an opportunity, a rookie. I think you should put in your head, I need to get to a certain percentage close to Max, and I'm good, and try to learn from Max. That is how I would motivate myself, because if you motivate yourself to try to beat Max, it will be very difficult to beat him, and then you could get away being a beaten man. It happened in that team before. There was a few drivers which left there, which didn't make it afterwards anymore because Max was just too strong for them. And Liam, being a rookie, he can take a year or two to do that. If you're a driver which is in Formula One 10 years and then you're put in a team with Max and he beats you all the time, you get a little bit, down on yourself. But if you're a rookie, you should see it as a positive. I'm with the best driver in the world. I do the best I can to get close to him. I look how he does it. And then maybe in 2 years he's got the opportunity either to be number one there because the other one goes away, or to be number one somewhere else.
So talking about number ones and number twos, let's talk about Carlos Sainz, because here's a guy who was a race-winning driver at Ferrari. Ferrari let him go to take on Lewis. He turns up here, and I know we've only had one practice session, but he's done a good job out there ahead of Alex Albon. I mean, it's so interesting when you see a top driver like Carlos go to a smaller team, because he brings with him the knowledge and the capability to do things that perhaps a team haven't previously experienced.
Yeah, it's called experience. He brings experience from a big team to a small team, which is always welcome. And Carlos is a very good driver. He won races, so I think it's not only bringing the experience, but also for Williams bringing somebody in like him. People look up to it and say, "Hey, Carlos Sainz went there, so maybe I go there as well." Talented engineers, talented mechanics, they look up to it. The team is getting strong. So I want to be on this ride. So I think it's good for everyone. And obviously, Carlos, we know he works very hard to make the team better. So, it's very early. We had one session, but I think he will do a good job for the team.
So, Guenther, you've been here in Australia for a while. You're doing your book tour. You are doing Network 10 television this weekend. You're doing lots of appearances. Are you enjoying your life after team principalship?
Yeah, I'm enjoying my life, and I work also for Performance Insight. You know, you forgot that one on the list.
Very nice brand mention there. Thank you very much. I'm not having to pay him to say that.
No, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Otherwise I could choose to do something different. It's good to be around, still in Formula One, seeing all the people, connecting with them. So I'm very happy here.
And there you have it from Guenther Steiner. Well, I hope you enjoyed his thoughts on Formula One 2025. Always a great guy to talk to. I must say, super popular in Formula One. When you spend a day with him in the paddock, you realise he cannot walk 2 meters without people stopping to talk to him. And that is inside the Formula One paddock. Can you imagine what it's like when he goes into the public areas? He was saying to me that actually on, I think it was Thursday morning, he tried to go for a walk in downtown Melbourne, but he had to give up because he said just everyone seems to recognise him. Such is the impact of the Netflix effect on Guenther, and of course aided by the promotion that's done around his book tour with Fane and those public events which he's been doing in particularly the UK and Australia, but also later this year in the United States as well. So we'll be back with you for another episode of the Business of Winning podcast very shortly. You can, of course, follow us on social media. We are on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. We can also be reached out to via our website, which is performanceinsights.co.uk. Do feel free to send us any questions, messages, thoughts on the podcast or guests that you would like to hear from. And we look forward to talking to you soon and give you further insights from the people and the happenings in the world of Formula One, the business of winning.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the Business of Winning podcast. And if you want to learn more about Performance Insights, simply visit our website at performanceinsights.co.uk, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide.